In November 2017, I gave a lecture at the Jardín Botánico Culiacán, a park contemporary art gallery in northwestern Mexico. I talk about the Mexican Cultural Project for the 21st century, which I had launched years before as the country's Minister of Culture. There, one could live an experience of total immersion into Encounter, a work by American artist James Turrell. Or one could play with Mexican artist Gabriel Orozco's piece, Go for No Borders, and, as did my wife, Julia, get to a cool moment in which nobody wins and could be never ending. One could also experience a choking piece by Teresa Margolles, a local artist. It's a set of cement-deck chairs. Their concrete had been mixed with water, which was previously used at the local morgue with cleansing the bodies of murdered people. It's a very, very shocking piece. This locates on Stay Away in Culiacán, classified as the world's 12th most violent city in the world in 2017, according to the Citizens Council for Public Security's annual ranking. But before I continue, I would like to thank all the people organizing this conference and bringing us together. I will talk about Bogota, Colombia, where I got involved in an ongoing process of cultural transformation. About Ciudad Juárez, Mexico, where I took part in the articulation of social factors with culture as its center. And regarding Culiacán, which I would like to reflect upon the aforementioned project that I think deserves to be studied in detail. Empty signifier is a concept coming from political theory. According to the political and social theorist Ernesto Laclau, as he wrote in his book Emancipation, societies are organized through hegemonic discourses, networks of meanings that give sense to different elements of social life. The diverse demands of groups and individuals need to articulate with each other. The factor enabling such articulation is the empty signifier, as it were, the core of the network of meaning in a society, the piece holding ideas and practice together. Please let me insist. Culture offers an articulated order, in contrast with isolated and dispersed efforts, as I will analyze by focusing on Bogota, Ciudad Juárez, and Culiacán. Bogota, expanding public space. In this Colombian city, in the early 20s, I joined a project which was part of the city's undergoing cultural turn started by the city's mayor, Antanas Mockus, who got groundbreaking administration designed with civic culture as their goal. Libraries became a site per excellence for these citizen-centered policies. An example of this was the Virgilio Barco Libraries in Northwest Bogota, first opened by the end of 2001. This was a building designed by architect Rogelio Salmona, who was a disciple of the internationally renowned French architect Le Corbusier. The cultural project I got involved in was the Gabriel Garcia Marquez Cultural Center. This is in La Candelaria, the historical center of Bogota. In 2003, the Mexican publishing house, Fondo de Cultura Económica, a state institution, bought a plot of land and commissioned Salmona, Rogelio Salmona, to design the Gabriel Garcia Marquez Cultural Center. Salmona came out of semi-retirement to complete this project, strengthening the cultural links between Colombia and Mexico. The Gabriel Garcia Marquez Center was opened in November 2007, jointly by Mexican President Felipe Calderón and Colombian President Álvaro Uribe. Salmona's idea was to create a continuum of public space, enlarging it. The cultural center was an extension of the street, of the narrow pavements, which in turn were an extension of the center, an open path for the wanderer, the viandante, who almost without noticing could step in and out of the center of the Gabriel Garcia Marquez Cultural Center. The viandante as an explorer, as the subject directly benefiting from culture as the ultimate service for the citizen. I really admire Salmona's ambition, as his design was an architectural as well as a contribution to urban design, and he built an empty signifier. Ciudad Juárez, the last frontier. Juárez is a city as a border and a border itself. Ciudad Juárez is a lighthouse of exchange as one of the most important crossroads in the world, as it is to the city of Tijuana. Every day, thousands of people and products cross the border between Mexico and the United States. This is a point of connection between the developed and the developing world, as well as a link between Anglo-Saxon and Hispanic cultures. Ciudad Juárez had known violence for a long time. And in January 2010, it suffered a massacre in the Villas de Salvarcar neighborhood. The victims were teenagers and young people of local high school and colleges. Up to 16 of them died and 12 were wounded. Faced with this, Presidente Calderón took the decision of transforming the violent situation in Ciudad Juárez. The president deployed all possible state powers, granting culture the protagonist role in reverting the city's violence. The cultural intervention meant the organization of choirs, orchestras, and libraries. 10 young and children's symphonic orchestras and 10 choirs closely related to them were founded. This meant the involvement from the outset of over 800 children and young people around Lenin Nutricious. The federal government provided the instruments, other equipment, and education materials. This implied children and teenagers gathering to practice, learning how to play instruments, becoming knowledgeable about music, and enjoying each other's company in a productive environment. The purpose and outcome were well beyond the orchestras and artistic creativity. Since these learning nucleuses led to learning how to work in groups, taught personal discipline, and develop the self-esteem of those taking part in the choirs and orchestras. Because of these positive consequences, the program was replicated across the country. President Calderón also instructed the Minister of Culture, which I lead, to be part of the program Todos Somos Juárez. We are all Juárez. This included the development of a series of model libraries in the city. The first one was the Benito Juárez Library, followed by the Francisco Villarreal Library, and the one located in Villas de Salvarcar. All of them, on top of providing books, spaces for art exhibition and other documentation services, including resources for visually impaired people, were as well cultural centers designed to provide the spaces for community meetings and for children to stay in safe environments. Our policy was to turn libraries into public spaces which were a key part of everyday life for Juarez people. The Todos Somos Juarez program also included culture-wise, the refurbishment of museums, cinemas, and theaters, the expansion of the library's collection, and providing them with new technologies, updating the local regulations on culture, training civil servants in the field of culture, multiple community projects, a local database of artists and promoters, creating orchestras, promoting local artists at the national level, and campaigning in favor of ethnic diversity. Todos Somos Juarez involved the federal, state, and local levels of government and policies beyond culture. The program sought to carry out public policies that involve civil society in them. Meaningful statistics emerged regarding the contention of violence in Ciudad Juarez. While in 2010, there were 2,042 murders, by 2012, the last year in office of President Calderon and his cabinet, this had diminished to 740. This horrendous crime had been dramatically reduced. Within Todos Somos Juarez, libraries were a concrete expression of a space where Juarez inhabitants had the chance of coming together, a space to get acquainted with the pleasure of reading and the factor of articulation, culture as an empty signifier. Botanical garden, a new traditional public space. Wow, Culiacan has been associated to drug trafficking and the culture that has developed around it for decades. There, we can find on one of the public spaces that impressed me and that I admire the most. And it is a project greatly appreciated by the public. The Botanical Garden Culiacan offers several dimensions of contemporary art on top of preserving over 1,000 different plants. The person behind this endeavor, in interaction between government, national and local, society and the artists, is entrepreneur and patron of the arts, Agustin Coppel. Mr. Coppel has provided all the works of art which are part of the Isabel and Agustin Coppel collection. He also has encouraged the collaboration of international companies such as the BBVA Foundation, which co-financed a new piece for Mexican artist Abraham Cruz Villegas, and of Deutsche Bank, which financed an auditorium designed by prize-winning Mexican art architect Tatiana Bilbao. The Botanical Garden Culiacan has works of art at the highest global level. Among many more, it has works by Brazilian Valesca Suarez, British Richard Long, Danish Olafur Eliasson, Mexican Javier Marin, and Belgian Francis Alice. This is, as it were, a cultural lawn and a space of peace for the city and beyond. Cultural interventions like the Botanical Garden offers artists the chance to have social engagement. In this sense, I would like to mention artist Pedro Reyes in particular, and his work, Shovels for Wounds, 2007. In it, Reyes made 1,547 metal shovels out of 1,547 guns, obtained through a government program to disarm the population of Culiacan. Reyes thinks violence is a cultural program and regards art as a possibility. Reyes thinks violence is a cultural problem and regards art as a possibility to transform society. Therefore, the ultimate purpose is for such shovels to be used in planting the 1,547 trees. As for the artist piece, apart from shovels in exhibition at the Botanical Garden, a video shows the sequence of transformations. First, bones were collected from members of the public through polls in newspapers, radio, and TV broadcasts in Culiacan. In exchange for surrendering their weapons, people got coupons exchangeable for electronic devices. Then, the video shows the melting and reshaping of the iron. What were once turned into a new, more amicable form, a transformation ritual that could mirror that of society. Reyes shovels for once had a link to Ciudad Juárez. In February 2012, at the Felipe Ángeles Community Center, with the presence of Presidente Calderón, we launched a reforestation campaign using the shovels produced by Reyes. We aim to create awareness through self-discovery and individual introspection. Again, culture rested at the center of the action, a silent, empty signifier, fulfilling its own social role. The planted trees became a sign of hope and bore a message for future generations. The preservation of trees will mean the protection of a future for everyone. From guns to shovels, from aggressions to hope, accompanied by culture. Conclusion. The successful cases I have talked about, Bogotá, Ciudad Juárez, and Culiacan, are, from my perspective, clear examples of how culture could articulate a series of social factors, giving society novel answers to violence. Latin America is a region of exciting cultural density. Whether we think of the poems by Mexican Octavio Paz, the paintings by Colombian Fernando Botero, or the songs of the myriad of the region's popular singers. Culture is an asset that should be considered for different kinds of public interventions. Given the significance of culture, it could play a key role in restructuring broken Latin American cities. As I have shown today, this requires that cultural policy, artists, local communities, business people, and individuals are granted a protagonist role, as in the cases of Bogotá, Ciudad Juárez, and Culiacan. These cultural interventions made an empty signifier out of culture. The social element linking together concepts and practices and making sense of what happens within a society. This shows how culture become a key tool contributing to social development and an alternative to alleviate ailments of society. This model could be replicated in developing nations as well as developed countries. The cities that have become trapped in the spiral of violence could also learn to speak the language of art. Thank you for your listening.